This episode of the Pain Education Corner is sponsored by the Comella Foundation. The Comella Foundation is committed to relieving pain naturally using osteopathic healing principles. Here at the Comella Foundation, we envision a world where people achieve their maximum potential by being empowered with knowledge and skills to heal themselves and others. This information is to be used for educational purposes only and not to be construed as medical advice. If you have any questions or concerns, please consult a licensed healthcare professional. Hello, it's Bill, the knee pain guru, and welcome to the Pain Education Podcast brought to you by the Comella Foundation. Today we have a special guest, Brian Schwager. Correct me. Was I close?
You were right on.
Right on, Schwager. Okay, and Brian, him and I got into a conversation the other day about structure and pain, and I was like, Brian, we got to have you on the show. We got to talk about your approach to addressing pain. So, Brian, thank you very much for being here.
It's my pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So the title of today's show is called The Structural Approach for Pain Relief. Would you share your history, your background, like what brought you to this point?
Well, basically, I've always liked to exercise. I grew up around it. My dad and my uncle were serious weightlifters and strength people growing up. So they were always in the basement pumping iron. So I grew up around all that, picking up weights at 5 years old, pretending I was my uncle or my dad. That later on morphed into me getting self-educated, not listening to my parents or my uncle on how to weight train with a bunch of buddies in my basement or their basement. And that grew into some pretty serious training. I got to say that the two original inspirations besides my father and my uncle were the Monajeski brothers, some serious basement weightlifting guys. And then that later on, I got interested in martial arts, thanks to watching a lot of Bruce Lee. And then that morphed into me joining a martial arts dojo, where my master instructor was also very heavy into resistance training. So we had a portion of the dojo as a weightlifting area. So years go by, I'm still working out in the basement with my friends. I'm going to the dojo. And before I know it, I'm designing my own exercise programs. I mean, really at age 15, I started writing and designing exercise programs for me. At age 21, I started writing a few of them for the karate students. And by age 24, I was designing strength training programs for a professional kickboxer. And those opportunities then turned into me thinking maybe I should take this on as a career.
Got it.
So with that being said, that meant I don't want to go too far back into my background as far as education, but I will say I never finished high school. That way your listeners have an idea that when I looked at going to school, I had to start with a diploma. Then I had to earn my rite of passage into the university. So by the time I got to the university, I was already in my late 20s. I was already training 4 professional athletes, working at a clinic. I had 70 clients based on various locations. I was a very motivated and a go-getter. And then school jumped into the equation. Exercise science was my undergrad. And from there, that morphed into me working at more facilities, growing my business, and then going into business for myself in 1994 with the mind-body connection. And I don't know how much more you want to go forward, but it started way back when I was about 15, writing my first exercise program.
Got it. And I know we've chatted offline, and you have extensive training in a lot of different areas. Could you kind of give an overview? You've mentioned Paul Chek, other experts that you have studied with, trained under, studied their programs. Could you kind of share a little bit of that as well?
Sure thing. When it would be about 1990, I got the chance to work next to some of the to work next to the physical therapist that took care of the Olympic speed skaters, the athletic trainer, the strength coach. So that was a good amount of information and education. But moving forward, 2003, I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, and I wanted to go back to school to further my education because the industry was changing, as we were talking about. And in 2003, I got a great opportunity to work with a functional neurologist. I was looking at going to the Czech Institute. He was on board with that. So I enrolled in the Czech Institute. I also enrolled and studied under Gray Cook, Kyle Kiesel, and a number of others through the functional movement system. And from there were probably at least a half dozen other workshops and professionals that I would do my continuing education through, thanks to the doctor that I worked for. He was really big on continuing ed. Not that I wasn't, but he was really big on it. Sometimes it would be 6-7 times a year that I would go to these courses. Mm-hmm. And some of those, because I worked for him as a corrective exercise specialist, most of those workshops were only open to physical therapists and those with those types of degrees or doctorates. But he got me in the door, and that was a blessing, because being amongst those types of peers and learning, my education was fast tracked. Not to say that the 8 years with the functional neurologist, that was like mentoring to me. That wasn't a job. That was like on the job learning and expanding my knowledge before I went out on my own in 2009.
Mm-hmm. Could you speak to what functional movement is for someone who's not familiar with it at all?
Yeah, it's a pretty broad term. I guess the way I look at it is we have to be able to function in life in a three-dimensional environment. So we have to be able to, or as I was taught, there are 7 basic primal movement patterns that we need to survive. And those are going to be bending, twisting, squatting, pushing, pulling, and variances of gait. So what do we got? We got squatting, bending, pushing, pulling, twisting, and lunging, and then gait. In life, when we function to get in and out of a car or to move a box or just for everyday function, we need to have the functional capacity to move through life freely without restriction. So that's the way I look at function. I look at the individual. I first look at every individual needs the 7 basic fundamental movement patterns. And then I go beyond that and get a little bit more in detail depending on their long-term dream or their goal. So as an example, functional for my 71-year-old client, she just wants to be able to walk and enjoy life without restriction or pain. So I'm going to restore her function for that functionality. Versus when I trained and helped a young man get prepared for Navy SEAL training, that was a different outcome for function. So I had to go to the extreme to prepare his body for the ultimate amount of functional capacity that he would need for his work in that case. So function, for those that are listening, if you look at what your dream is, or well, people call it your goal, whatever you want to accomplish, whether you want to throw a baseball, work in the garden, or just move through life, that function you need to have at its, highest level of capacity so that you can reduce your chances of injury. The more dysfunction you have in a movement, the more increase you have for injury.
Got it. So, and this is in my own work with clients in pain, there's a disconnect. A lot of times you ask them what they want and they just want to be out of pain. So their focus is very tunnel vision, and just to be out of pain, where I hear you with the functional movement, you're looking at the outcome they want on the other side of the pain, well, in this case, the SEAL training, or the woman who's able to work in the garden, or whatever that situation is. How, because this gets into, and it always fascinates me, how pain changes the psychology of a person, how they think, how they feel. And it cuts this short in terms of the goals that they want or have in life, because everything they've been told or everything they've tried to this point hasn't worked. Can you speak to picking that apart? Because it kind of seems like a big, massive ball of like where to begin. Like, how does a person begin? They come to you in pain. How are you picking that thing apart when they're going, well, I just want to be out of pain?
Right. So yes, people come in and want triage. They want to get out of pain immediately, and that makes sense. And I try to get to their why, like you were saying. What is the why? So like you said, I had a client come to me once and she said, I have knee pain. I need to get out of knee pain. And I said, well, what is your reason? Well, my doctor said that if I lose some weight, that'll be easier on my knee. Okay. And I said, okay, that's good. But there's something else missing here. And believe me, the conversation's a little bit more elaborate. But what she ended up saying was, I want to be able to hike with my husband without pain. And I said, there's your why.
Right.
Once we have their why do you want to get out of pain? That's the anchor, because that's the long-term dream. She wants to be able to hike with her husband, but when she comes into my office, she's at 100% pain. So along that journey, there are going to be times where she's going to have good days and bad days. I always tell my clients, I'm very transparent. There are going to be days you're going to want to do this. There's going to be days you don't. There's going to be days you're going to be frustrated, etc. But I said the difference is with the right coaching and helping you to anchor to your why, you won't give up. As long as the plan is laid out accordingly and we are getting to the source of the problem. In my previous work, we patched up people on a regular basis, and there's a time and place for that. Don't get me wrong. If you got to get back to work, you got to get back to the field. We want to get you there as quick as possible and as safe as possible. But I guarantee you, until you get to the cause, there's going to be repetitive problems over months and years. I got a little frustrated with that approach, because I would see clients or patients come back periodically. And that's when I started to look in another direction about 1998. But going back to your question, people, I get it. I mean, I've been there. So I want to get out of pain so that I can do X, Y, and Z. But in order to maintain that course of dedication, because we have the desire, pain is a great doctor. It's a great motivator. In fact, Paul Chek refers to it as the pain doctor. It is your guide. And I always tell people, your pain is an opportunity, because your body's telling you that something is majorly wrong. Now, we want to get to them before pain, but we'll talk about that in a bit. So the pain becomes the doctor. We find out what the why is. We anchor them in the why, and then they start the journey. Believe me, I've been doing this a long time. It is a journey. And what I ended up creating was 4 principles so that I could understand and help them on that journey so that they can eventually learn how to fish. And I don't just give them a fish and feed them for a day.
Excellent. No, that's great. And I think too many people are just into the triage. They're into the drug, the shot, the surgery, the physical therapy, and then they get on that hamster wheel where they don't get off of it. They're stuck there. And as they get older, they get more frustrated. They feel more helpless and hopeless, because the more effort they're putting into it, they're getting less results. And from my perspective, it's like, we need a strategy. We need to have a bigger picture. We need to have that guidance and support, so you aren't You're avoiding the landmines and the pitfalls along the way. And I hear you doing that exactly. You just spoke about 4 principles.
Yeah, I mean, I had to come up with something, and again, I got to give a lot of thanks to Paul Chek, because he had a system, and the system it's impeccable. So from that system, I created, eventually what I created was the 4 principles to wellness and movement. What are the 4 basic things that we need for you to feel and move well? Because remember, the majority of the time when somebody comes in, it's a little different now in 2021, but let's say back in 2009, when I first opened my facility here in Asheville, people came in with a physical problem. Mm-hmm. All right, I have a physical problem. And what I began to share with them is that the physical challenge that you have is a representation to other systems in the body that are out of balance. Your whole body is out of balance. Your life is out of balance. So whether it's inflammatory or a traumatic, tissue related injury. Now we'll go off into some tangents here in a minute. There are 3 keys to how the body moves, if you will. I mean, I'm not going to say, maybe let me rephrase that. There are 3 principles that help the body move well. And the 3 principles are, number 1 is your emotional health. So the emotions are the way we perceive life, and in the brain, it depends on how we process the information, with your brain being a processor and your body, muscles, joints, etc., being the software. Depending how we're using the hard drive will depend on how the software functions. So number 1, it's emotional health. That is, in every case that I had between 1994 and 2003, I decided that it was the emotional capacity of that injury, or what led up to the injury, that is not really being addressed. Now, once that emotional system has been over innervated, right? So high stress, when people think of stress, you have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that there are various types of stress that we encounter. There's physical stress, there's emotional stress, there's biochemical stress. Maybe you drank the wrong liquid or ate the wrong food, which ties in with nutritional stress. There's electromagnetic stress. There's temperature, which increases stress on the body, people that work in high heat environments, etc. But what we're talking about is emotional stress and its effect on the physical body. When the body is under a high amount of emotional stress, it can change the hormonal system in a heartbeat. The 2 most important systems in the body are the nervous system and the hormonal system. Your muscles and bones are absolutely stupid. They only follow the directions given by the nervous system and by the hormonal system. So actually, those systems need to be calmed down in order to get out of pain. Pain is showing me that you're hot, you're in a high heat environment. And if your listeners know anything about yin and yang, think of yin as cool, think of yang as hot. Think of yin as building, think of yang as breaking down. So they have all this heat. I need to cool that system down in various ways, and to re-regulate the hormonal and the nervous system. Now, the hormonal system can also affect our sleep, which is principle number 2. So let's go back. Principle number 1 is emotional health. Principle number 2 is biochemical health.
And this is these are the 4 principles to wellness and movement, or these are correct? Different? Okay.
So I moved from 1 to 2 because the second most, the second highest rating in my wellness movement subjective questionnaire was a lack of sleep. So first, they have too much emotional stress. And then I ask them about their sleep, and they say, well, I have a hard time getting to sleep. And then when I wake up to go to the bathroom, I can't get back to sleep, or I just wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning. Now, we have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., that's when your body goes into physical repair. So if that system's being interrupted, then we're not getting tissue repair the way we should. Between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., is when your body goes into neurological repair. So your neurotransmitters, everything that helps you to think, blink, and react, these systems are augmented by the neurological system, and it needs time for repair. So if my clients aren't sleeping and they're coming to me for exercise of any sort, whether I'm working with an athlete or just the everyday person, if they're not getting recovery, then why are they paying me? Because exercise, now we can look at this two different ways. Exercise can break down, that's the process. If you want to build muscle, you have to break things down before your body rebuilds it. When somebody's in pain, we can't use certain types of exercises because it overstimulates the nervous system. But what I'm saying is, if I'm helping them to, let's say, heal their back, restore their back from a back injury. So I give them exercises, go home and you practice these. But if they're not sleeping between 10 and 2 a.m., then it's kind of a wash. They're not getting the repair, okay? So sleep, as a lot of your listeners will know, sleep is vitally important. It is almost the chief operator next to emotion. That's why I made it principle 2. Principle 3 is nutritional health. What kind of raw materials are you feeding your body? You know, we want to build tissue, especially for those who are in pain. Everybody wants to build good, lean muscle tissue. In fact, lean muscle tissue is more metabolically active than fat. It takes more energy to maintain lean muscle tissue than it does fat. However, like building a house or building something from scratch, the better your raw materials, the better you're going to have on restoration for the tissues. So I look at, you know, everything what they put in their lips and they put in their mouth, so that I can start to help them slowly. This is a very, very step-by-step process, because as you can already hear, by me examining what they're eating, you'd be surprised at how many people don't want to write it down and give it to me. Well, you don't want to know what I ate for breakfast. Well, yes, I do, because if you're going to hire me, I'm going to help to change that, so that not only can we get you out of pain, but that we can help your health in general. Because remember, it goes beyond the pain. We're looking at wellness. So once the knee is better, we want to make sure that your whole body is better. Mm-hmm. So principle 1 is emotion. Principle 2 is biochemical, or how we sleep. Principle 3 is nutrition, and not only what we eat. You've heard this before, I bet you. It's what you digest. Oh. So if we're not breaking it down, I remember when I had my digestion first really analyzed, I was 35, I'm now 59. And my naturopathic doctor said, you're not digesting protein, fats, or carbohydrates. I said, what do you mean I'm not digesting those? I'm eating organic. He goes, yeah, but you're not breaking them down. So we have to make sure that we put the right raw materials in for their metabolic type. And then we have to make sure their digestive system is functioning, because their digestive system, or your stomach, is your second brain. In fact, some scientists are now referring to it as the first brain. In fact, serotonin, which helps you to sleep through the night, it has other benefits too. Serotonin, about 95% of it is produced in the gut. So when my clients have pain, they have an overstimulation of cortisol and inflammatory hormones. I look at their gut, their digestion is not well, so that's why they have half of the inflammation they have. And then I look at their sleep, and I relate that to the questionnaire on digestion. And I start, you know, with the 4 principles, I start understanding the last principle, which is physical health. Remember, they walked in, let's say, with knee pain. And the first thing I tell them is, you don't have knee pain. You don't have a knee problem. You have a body problem, right? So we know that the knee is just a section of the body that operates along with the ankle, the hip, and everything else that's subconnected to that part of the structure. You know, the knee bone's connected to the thigh bone and all that kind of stuff. Sure. However, when that person says, you know, I have a knee problem, I end up finding out that they have digestive issues. There may be some emotional stress that's creating inflammatory responses. They may have had muscle. I won't even say maybe. I know that before that client got to me with knee pain, because they'll say, God, I really wish I would have met you 6 years ago. And I said, well, 6 years ago, did you have pain? They go, no, but I wish I would have learned to exercise from you, right? I wish I would have learned to exercise from you. So what I end up, telling them is this, is that my job, besides working with people that have pain, and I don't do this alone, I have a team, is I would like to help people see their dysfunction before it turns into pain.
Mhm.
An analogy I use a lot of times at a presentation or a seminar is I'll look out at my audience and I'll say, what if you knew you were going to be in an accident today before you left the house? Well, if you knew that, you wouldn't need car insurance because you'd be avoiding it. Well, if I watched you move and I've looked at your 7 basic movement patterns and I looked at your posture and a couple of other things, I can detect things that may happen in the future. Wouldn't that be cool?
Mhm.
And that's what I started doing starting in about 2004, was evaluating and looking at movement, seeing the dysfunction. The client may say, well, I got a little bit of tightness when I did that. But I said, but you didn't get any pain, right? They go, no. I said, well, that's good. The tightness is sort of like, well, I don't know, a lot of times they'll use the analogy of an automobile.
Mhm.
So you have your little indicator lights that let you know you have to do an oil change, or your engine light goes on, which is the
Right.
most mysterious thing, right? Well, that's good because the car is letting you know that there's something going wrong. I
Mhm.
just wish there was a step before the light went on.
Mhm.
Well, in the body, there are. So when my clients come in with no pain and I do a movement assessment, I do a lifestyle assessment, I can see things in their body's movement that is going to precipitate,
Precipitate.
yes, an injury.
Yeah.
So let's say I watch them squat
Mhm.
and their hips move to the right as they squat down. Well, they
Mhm.
don't have any pain, but they really didn't know that was happening, because I videotape it, show it back to them. And I say, if you keep doing that, you're going to end up with a back problem, a knee problem, and a shoulder problem, and possibly a neck problem. Really? But I don't have any pain now. I go, good. All we have is
Yeah.
dysfunction without pain.
Right.
So the 4 principles, once you get to the 4th principle, we're looking at how you move. And we're not looking at it just statically. It's a regional interdependence of the body's movement ability. So in other words, again, going back to that person that has a knee problem, I'm looking at the whole kinetic chain from the foot up to the occiput, maybe even up to the TMJ, to help me to understand why that knee pain is there. And that's where people kind of go, what? Why are you looking at my jaw? Why are you looking at my range of motion of my neck when I have a problem at my knee? And I
Mhm.
said, because your knee is connected to your thigh, your femur. Your femur hooks up into your hip, and your hip basically talks to your cervical spine.
Sure.
So if your neck is out, your hips are out, your knee is out, you won't know that until you got knee pain. You got a meniscus problem, an ACL problem, or ligamentous problem. And all of that was caused because up the kinetic chain, we had imbalances that nobody was looking at because there was no reason,
Mhm.
right? Because people will come to us because they're in pain. Now they got a reason, right? And I
Mhm.
try to educate personal trainers. I said, when a person hires you, of course, they're not in pain because you're not qualified to work with them. Then I said, you must assess them. So as Paul Chek says, if you're not assessing, then you're guessing what the problem is.
Mhm.
And, I worked in clinics in the 90s. We did the best job we could. I got to say that the clinics that I worked with up there, they were a lot more open-minded. They did look at the whole body.
Mhm.
But the point is, if we're not thoroughly assessing lifestyle and the body, then we're
Mhm.
missing the point. And that's where the word holistics comes in, because people will say, I want to go to a holistic doctor. I want to go to somebody holistic that'll treat my knee. So holistic means treating the whole body, right? That doesn't mean just the knee or the thigh or the hip. And then the last part is integrated. So by 4 principles, they all talk to one another.
Mm-hmm.
So they're an integrated system of systems, which is what your body is. It's a it's a cybernetic organism. Your body's like a very, very fancy computer inside of an organism. So you have how many systems in the body? 10 systems.
Mm-hmm.
You have a nervous system, lymphatic system, cardiovascular, and I won't name them all, but you get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those systems, muscular, they all talk to one another. And that's where we have to move our paradigm when we look at pain. It's like a research study that I read. It was called The Ghost in the Machine, written by Paul Chek and Dr. Walden out of the UK. And what that tells you, ladies and gentlemen, the ghost behind the machine is, okay, here's your knee pain. I'm going to go and peel back the layers because the mystery is in your health history. Somewhere, something was missed because that knee keeps coming back with the same problem. You can look at it 15 ways sideways mechanically, and I'm sure we're going to find more problems, but we have to look outside the muscular system. We got to start looking at organs. We got to start looking at definitely the nervous system, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So that's the 4 principles.
Yeah. And what I think you're really bringing up and what many people miss, especially when they're searching on the internet for relief from pain, is they're only looking at one dimensional. My knee hurts. What exercises do I need to do so my knee will get better? And just with, if there's 10 systems in the body and they're all interconnected and they're all affecting each other, and you just look at the muscular system with that as it relates to the skeletal system, as it relates to the cardiovascular system, you have all of these things. Every time you add on another system, you increase the number of dynamics that are going on and the interrelationship exponentially. So it's like, it's fascinating to me. And that's what makes the body so incredibly interesting. When I work with clients, or, I'm sure when you work with clients as well. So here's what's coming to mind. And I see you have the structure, and this is something we talked about offline as well. You have very much the structure, and then you're coming to relieve pain. I'm coming from specifically to relieve pain, and then I don't necessarily get into all of the structure components that you're bringing to the table. I'm curious, if someone does come to you with a knee issue, how soon is that pain addressed in the process? Because I understand you're putting them on a journey. It starts, they get on the path, and you're looking at the emotional health, the biochemical component, the nutritional health, the physical health that's going on in your 4 principles. But where in that does the person start experiencing relief, or you're addressing what's going on with their pain?
The first place we got to start is calming down the nervous system, because when they're in pain, they're in high inflammation. Their sensory system is highly acute. So they have knee pain. They may have it when they go downstairs, upstairs, or just standing. So the first thing we got to do is we have to remove the nerve interference.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's very complicated to answer this question because it depends on the injury. Every injury is a little bit different, but basically I start with creating an alkalized environment by teaching them how to breathe. I teach them to bring their sympathetic nervous system down and their parasympathetic system up. Mm-hmm. I'll take them off of certain foods, because there are foods that enhance the inflammatory process. So sugar, grains. I worked with a physical therapist once, long distance, because he was working with a client of mine in California. And his motto was, if I'm going to work with your client, Brian, if they have pain, they have to get off grain, because grain converts to sugar, and sugar creates an inflammatory response. So again, that person's like, well, Brian, I know, okay, I'm into it. Like I just had a client tell me this morning, I want to do the journey. I want to get on the path. What's the next step? The next step is to come in and start learning how to apply the 4 principles to your lifestyle so we can bring down the inflammatory markers. That person is frustrated, right? They're in pain,
Mm-hmm.
they're anxious, and odds are their sleep is off, right? So that's telling me that their nervous system is on overload,
Mm-hmm.
right? No amount of medication. Yes, I want them to increase their water. Yes, they can take natural anti-inflammatories. No, I would recommend that they don't take a pain medication unless it's absolutely necessary, because sometimes it's necessary temporarily to be put on a medication. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
anti-medication. I'm anti-misusing medication,
Sure.
just like exercise for knee pain. Exercise is great, but wrongly prescribed, it can have a side effect like a drug can. Exercise is like a drug, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
So, but again, I want to get out of pain, Brian. What do I need to do first? Well, the first thing we're going to do is teach you how to breathe and relax. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start changing what you're putting in your body that's causing the inflammation. Because this, the erratic, anxious thinking and then the eating of the stress is pushing their inflammatory system higher, right? And you can already see, I could probably already tell, I could see this usually in an audience of people. This is where I start to lose them because they're like, oh, I'm not going to go through all that. And you probably won't. You can go on anti-inflammatories, do your ultrasound, get your electrical stimulation, and you'll get better. I guarantee I've worked on that. I've used those principles, but in the long run, it won't stay better. So that person that walked in my office with knee pain, they have probably had that knee pain on and off for more than 5 years. The client that was here yesterday, she's had her ankle and knee pain, which eventually had to be replaced, but she had an ankle, knee, hip, and low back pain on and off for 7 years. And the list of people that she saw were good, but there was no structure. And I'll go even beyond that. My structure is actually a system.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that client sitting there. Oh my God, I got to get out of pain. What are you going to have me do? I said, well, because you're doing a wellness movement questionnaire, because that's how I rate everything, I develop a preliminary system for you to follow. You follow the system and the system will correct the rest.
Mm-hmm.
But the hard part about following a system is discipline. And that's where the coaching comes in. Because I need to teach my client, again, I've been in pain. I know you don't even think right because you're just frustrated because of the damn pain. What I want them to know is that we have to calm you down, which is yourself, so that you can employ more self-discipline on following the systems or the recommendations that I make in your lifestyle, along with the exercises, because I do have to put together an exercise system, but it's what you think, it's how you sleep, it's what you digest, drink, and eat that'll help your body move well. And then you have to move correctly. And that's another misnomer about corrective exercise, right? What does that mean? But again, going back to the pain, what do I do right now? Start drinking alkalized structured water. Cut out any simple sugars in your eating plan, and any foods that are inflammatory, eggplant, red peppers, bell peppers. These are all pro-inflammatory foods. You can just Google online, ladies and gentlemen, look up pro-inflammatory foods and just start working off that list. And what you're doing is you're augmenting the chemistry. It's almost like we're taking water and we're pouring it on the fire. So they need more yin. Remember, yin is cooling, restorative, and we need to control the yang, which is catabolic and inflammatory. So it's a yin and yang approach. Everything I do is based off the 2 forces of life, which is yin and yang, and living in balance, which is the hardest part. Once we shift them, right, to that little center line that's in that yin and yang symbol, then it's up to them to be able to have a little bit of yang, but to match that with yin, right? So if I have a lot of stress in my day, I plant little yin practices throughout the day to rebalance my nervous system. And I always start and end my day with yin, because my day is full of yang, because I'm running a business, working out and doing what I love to do. But if that scale goes out of balance, what's going to happen to Brian? Well,
Sure.
what will happen, what happened in 1996 is I burnt out.
Sure.
Because I just had too much yang.
Got it. Too much yang. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Pain Education Corner. If you have a special talent or skill to relieve pain and you'd like to become a guest on our show, visit us at thecomellafoundation.org/interview. Help us spread the word on eliminating pain and suffering in the world. That's thecomellafoundation.org/interview. So Brian, share with us, what pain did you experience? Like, what did you do that caused discomfort, pain? What have you dealt with in your life?
Well, most of my pain was emotional, but then the physical part, I had 3 shoulder injuries on my left shoulder, 1 on my right. I had a bulging disc in my back from in 1987. Had multiple knee problems on the left. I never had surgery. I've always opted not to have surgery, but my left shoulder was pretty bad off from a wrestling incident. And those were all things that happened between ages 15 and about 30. I had plenty of head injuries because I was a kickboxer. So I would tell people that growing up, I never broke a bone growing up. I was blessed, but I had stitches all the time, even before kickboxing. I'd always have my head busted open. I mean, I remember my parents saying, if we take you to the hospital one more time this year, they're going to think we're beaten. So I had to walk through the valley of pain. And then I always tell people this too about my work, because they come here and they go through this comprehensive consultation and assessment. I tell them I've been through all of it. If I didn't do it on my body, how could I teach it?
Sure.
That's a prerequisite for the Paul Chek Institute. Everything you learn at the beginning, you're doing it on you. And then as you pass the courses, then you become qualified to do it on other people. Right. And I didn't, I got to say, in the first part of my career, doing this for 40 years, 28 years clinical. So before I got into my serious practice, I got to say, I wasn't doing things the right way. I was doing things based on what I was taught, what the industry knew at the time, which was ass backwards. Right. And when I decided to, there was a car accident in 97 where it was a pretty bad car accident I was in. I actually did finally break a bone. It was the second smallest bone in your body, down by my wrist here. But it was the pain that I had, the accident that I had, and I shared this with my clients, that was an opportunity for change. And I began to look at my life, and I was reevaluating my education for training, wellness. And that was the impetus for me to make the journey, the last journey I was going to be taking on learning this and relocating to Asheville, going back to school and whatnot. So my pain was my doctor. My emotional trauma became my friend and my opportunity. The other biochemical health problems, and I still have I guess that's what they tell me, I guess I still have an autoimmune challenge. Some doctors even said I wasn't going to be alive at this age. I had almost died twice in my life. But I got to tell you, it's when I changed my thinking in 1996, that's when everything else changed. And when I started to adapt the 4 principles in my own life, that's when I had remarkable changes. And then I opened up my business in 2009 based on these revelations that I had between 1996 and 2007.
Okay. Of course it makes sense. We've talked about you being in kickboxing. I was in judo, head injuries,
Yeah.
head injuries galore.
What
And
are you going to do?
I don't know if people actually realize how much being hit in the head can affect the physical body. And it ties right in with the emotional health, the capacity to be in a parasympathetic state or a rested and relaxed state for the body to begin to recover. So that's huge.
Yeah, head trauma, that's the number one question I ask now. Have you had a neck injury or head injury? Let me just share this with your listeners. Everybody thinks they know where the core is. The core muscles are the center part of the body, and you're right, they are, but there's more to it than that. But inside, deep inside, there's an inner core, and it operates on a different system, the autonomic nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So with a head injury, this is what I've learned the last 7 years, with concussions, it slows down the reflex potential of the muscle's response. That's a simple way of saying it. So imagine I took all those hits to the head, and as training as a kickboxer, of course, I did thousands of crunchies. We all did all that ab work, or the exercise itself was very core demanding, right? But little did I know, not until 2006, that I know that I had a separate core inside deep that was never responding. And that's the one that protects your spine and your joints. That's the first responder, ladies and gentlemen, not your abs. Your abs will provide you stability if you're going to throw a ball or lift an object or whatever. It does provide stability, but it's a secondary support. Head injuries create what is called lag. Information has to travel down the spinal cord, ladies and gentlemen. So it comes from the brain, the motor control system in the brain, travels down the spinal cord, and then goes out and does what it has to do. So if you're going to throw a ball, it'll tell your arm to do what, right? Mm-hmm. But your inner core, when you've had a head injury or some sort of trauma to the brain, you have two things that are happening. Either it's slowed down, that's called proprioceptive lag. I know it's a big term for your listeners, look it up. But the other one is called sensory motor amnesia. Now, everybody knows what amnesia means. I always forget the meaning of that definition. That's a little pun. So amnesia means to forget, right?
Gotcha.
So your inner core forgets what it's supposed to do. Now, remember, your body's like a computer system. So one of my jobs is to reprogram the inner core, to get it to talk to the brain again, to get that communication back online. So when that person has to use their arms and use their legs, the inner core is supposed to respond before the outer core to provide intrinsic stability to the structure. So let me repeat that. The inner core is supposed to respond before or contract before the outer core. So when I throw a ball, my inner core is supposed to reflex about 30 milliseconds before the outer core does. And if I'm going to kick a ball, it's about 110 milliseconds before the outer core. If that doesn't happen, and I throw the ball or kick the ball, the forces that come up through the body that are supposed to dissipate into your stabilizers to protect you, well, that ain't happening. The forces are landing right on the joints. And here we go back to back problems and knee problems and neck problems. I look at a pair of x-rays and I see all these arthritic changes or all this stuff going on. And I look at my client and say, well, your inner core has been off a long time. What do you mean? I don't even know I had an inner core. I go, well, that's the point. Okay. So head injuries, or asking our clients if they've had those, is I even teach that to my mentoring trainers. I go, even if you're not qualified to work with that person, and guaranteed this, if you ask that client if they had a head injury or a neck injury, you need to refer them out and get that. We need to find out make sure that area is cleared for takeoff. Again, that goes back to assessing. And again, that goes back to saying, you look at the history, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I ask questions about their health history, I'll just go right down. I'll say, have you had any head injuries?
Mm-hmm.
Stitches over your eyes, anything? How
Mm-hmm.
about your neck? Any car accidents, whiplash, hit from behind, hit from the side? And I go right down, shoulders, middle
Yep.
of the back, lower back. And as I start collecting data, I'm beginning to map out the challenge,
Mm-hmm.
right? Again, even if they come in with a specific joint problem, we'll start at the foot. I got an ankle and foot problem. Okay, so tell me about your head. What do you mean? And have you had any head injuries? Well, what does that have to do with my foot? See what I mean?
Yeah.
Head injuries, neck can go all the way down, joint by joint, so that I can begin to add up and look at the entire pattern that has been rendered dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, what our listeners what I would like to drive home is you don't have a body part problem, you have a whole body problem.
Yep. Yeah.
And believe me, it doesn't have to be as in depth. It all depends on what your dream is, your long-term goal, and it all depends on how long you had it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, my client comes in and says, I've had this for 7 years. I look at them and say, well, do you want to get to the cause of it this time, or you just want to get patched up?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if they're sitting here, they want to get to the root of it.
Right.
And it's a one step at a time, because the journey of 1,000 miles begins with
The first step.
that's right.
Yeah, first step. So I have 3 takeaways. This is someone who's listening to this. This would be like the cliff notes of the cliff notes of what you've shared, because you've shared a tremendous amount today. In terms of helping with their pain, the first one would be breathing, belly breathing specifically, to
That's
begin
correct.
to relax their nervous system. The second would be to begin drinking alkaline water. And then the third is do that Google search on pro-inflammatory foods, and I'll put that in the show notes as well, and begin reducing those pro-inflammatory foods from their diet.
Yep.
And that's going to help them tremendously in terms of getting the pressure off of the inflammation that is on the nerves in their knee or wherever else in their body, and begin to set up the conditions in their body that it'd be able to heal what's going on.
Yeah, what those 3 things do is it won't relieve the pressure on the nerve, but it will start to calm the chemistry down.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have 2 problems here. We have an inflammation, which is biochemical, heat,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have a mechanical disposition. If sometimes I'll look at a knee problem, depending if it's ACL, PCL, or whatever it is, and I'll look at the lumbar spine and see if there's a rotation, and there's let's say the nerve on L3 is being slightly tampered with because it doesn't take much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
That will change, the function of that part of the leg. But your list is exactly right. What we're doing is let's use the word buffer.
Mm-hmm.
Those act to buffer the chemistry.
Sure.
Right. So at least, and again, this isn't going to be overnight relief, because it depends on how long, we've had the pain on and off, and how long have we had how long have we been eating the wrong foods, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's I know people want a quick fix, and I get that, but I always have to slow my clients down when they walk in my door. And one more thing I'll take away as your listeners are listening, the clients that come in and see me are, they've already been vetted.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not cold calls, they're not walk-ins. You have to be ready for this type of an approach. Or if you work with a Czech practitioner, you got to be ready to make a commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And before that customer makes any commitment, I want that customer to feel comfortable with that practitioner's approach,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's like picking a school or buying a car or buying something that has investment value. You do your homework first, right? So that you make the right purchase. I don't want people spending money here, because spending money means to use up.
Mm-hmm.
But if you invest your money,
Mm-hmm.
that definition is for future benefit. And the journey that they go on is so that they can graduate, follow their own system. Remember, it's all about the difference between teaching them how to fish versus giving them a fish.
Right.
We have to start empowering people with the right information, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be up in front and honest with them in a kind and loving and compassionate way, and to develop a plan that's individual to them. There's no one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
If a knee pain client comes in, I don't go into my file drawer and look up knee pain systems.
Right.
I customize it based on them.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing where we went wrong. A one size fits all approach. You got an ACL. Here's an ACL protocol. Follow it. Well, okay, I
Yep.
guess that will work to an extent. I've
Mm-hmm.
used them, but I found gaps. I found things that were missing because time wasn't being taken care of. And if people are in a hurry, you listeners out there, if you're feeling like you're in a hurry, maybe you ought to buffer that system
Mm-hmm.
before you explore your options,
Yep.
because it's the operator that gets in the way of the operation.
Yeah. I was just telling my daughter this the other day.
Oh, really?
Well, she was upset and she was wanting to make a decision right there and then. And I was like, well, calm yourself down. Go take care of yourself. Do you need to go sit on your bed for a little while? Do you need to go for a walk? You need to go play? What do you need to do? Are you hungry? Are you tired? Whatever it is. And then come back and make that decision.
Very good. So what did Albert Einstein say? You
You
can't
can't
solve
solve
a
a problem on the level that the problem was created. You have to come from a higher level in order to resolve it.
Right. So what you did for your daughters, you just helped her to change her mind by changing the environment. Go sit, go
Mhm.
walk, go eat, or whatever it is. And like the client yesterday that's making a decision to work with me.
Okay.
What I do when they sit here, I said, I don't want you to make that decision here, because they're looking at the paper and saying,
Yep.
okay, do I need to sign? I go, no, you need to go home and sit and talk with this
Yep.
with your partner. You
Mhm.
need to think about this, because this is not a, I take it very seriously when they're going to invest in me,
Sure.
right? But what did I do? I slowed them down.
Mhm.
Well, what if they go home and they decide not to do it? Well, that's what was meant to be,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, that's where they're at. Brian, awesome. Thank you so much. This was great. So I had a few more questions. We spoke about this before. You don't work with clients online. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do and I don't. Beginner clients, I really can't, because let's say I get I get a lot of phone calls from all over the U.S. Okay, and I try to consult with them a little bit over the phone. But
Mhm.
what I end up having to do is find somebody that does what I do in their geographical area, so
Mhm.
that we can do a comprehensive
Got it.
physical assessment.
Mhm.
A consultation I can do over the phone.
Okay. Well,
I can
we'll
do lifestyle stuff, but when it comes to teaching at the beginning, hands-on is absolutely necessary in order for them to feel what I'm doing, and then I can feel what they're doing, because micro mistakes, that's what builds bad memory.
sure. Sure.
Yeah.
It's one of the things we're working through the Comella Foundation is creating a portal that people can come to the website and find someone that is in alignment with what they're dealing with, and then get help and support. And we're working on adding another level of specificity for the support that they would get. We're going to be interviewing, her name is Jeannie Anderson, in the future. Actually this week, we're going to be interviewing her. She does remote muscle testing. So she would actually be able to do like a real quick 5-minute, 10-minute consultation with a person who is in that space of that emotional, I need to do something right now. And they would be able to get on a call with Jeannie, who would be able to muscle test for the specific practitioner that the Comella Foundation is associated with, in alignment with, and then they can schedule a consultation time with that specific practitioner. So that's something we have in the works, which is kind of cool. And that thus asking you if you did the consultations or working with clients remotely, maybe not on the same capacity that you're doing in person, but something that would be able to provide help and support for someone who would be looking for it.
The wellness movement lifestyle questionnaire and consultation can be done anywhere. So let's say they do it and then we zoom in, I go over the results with them. It's the next step, like, where I would need to see them, or I could refer them to somebody in their geographical area, which still works, because I always tell people this: if I can't help you, I will find somebody that can.
Mm-hmm.
But, I've had, hundreds of calls, whether it was a consultation or not. And by the end of the phone call, they had more education, they had more optimism,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a contact, or at least an avenue to pursue the physical part.
Mm-hmm.
But physical exercise for my advanced clients, because I do personalized videos for my clients
Mm-hmm.
that they do in between the times that they see me. That works, but they learned it in school.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, one of the big things I see lacking in the fitness industry, from a fitness professional standpoint, not working with clients so much, is the lack of hands-on training.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to a workshop and you get lecture and hands-on, then you come home Monday morning, and where's the rest of the hands-on? You're trying to apply something that you remembered as much as you can,
Mm-hmm.
but rather than coming back and having plenty of hands-on training, right? Which is something I added to my mentoring program, because that is what, in other words, you can have all the audio, and some of the visual cueing, but the touch and the feeling that you get from some of the intricate exercises that I teach get lost.
Sure.
Without that touch. An advanced client doesn't need to do that no more, because they're beyond that point. Then I could be I've never done this, but let's say I did a Zoom call with an advanced client. They had their phone on in the gym. I had it here in my gym. I could show them how to squat, deadlift, and do all that stuff that way too,
Mm-hmm.
because they got all the idiosyncrasies out of the way. But let's say I'm watching them do a squat and their hips are going to one direction,
Mm-hmm.
rather than just saying, keep your hips straight, I would have to be there to augment other facilitations to make sure that's done correctly.
Sure. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
The physical action or the exercise, just so the takeaway is, there's nothing wrong with the videos, or learning online and all that. I got nothing against that. But at the beginning, when you're working with somebody who's really got some issues going on, there's nothing like, being on that treatment table, being on that exercise floor. Your trainer's got their hands around a certain part and they ask you to do something. Your trainer goes, yep, there you got it. Now I'm feeling it.
Yep.
Excellent job, Jane. Now you're getting it.
Yeah.
Because I was reinforced.
Sure. You could feel the muscle engage that's supposed to engage at the time it's supposed to engage. So all of it is at that moment for the client, as opposed to them kind of fumbling through it themselves and getting a general idea from the verbal back and forth. So yeah, what I'm able to do in an in-person session is infinitely more effective and to the point than it is walking a person through online.
Yep. That's why coaching is, I think health coaching is the next biggest frontier for our era of wellness. I think it's a great idea, because that you can do, you can do anywhere. And people just need that. They need that support.
Yep.
That's really what they need.
Awesome. Brian, great. I thank you so much for your time. I know the listeners are really going to enjoy what you have to share. It's been just awesome to have you here. I will have all of your contact information in the show notes for the call, so they can reach out to you, and we'll follow up with you as far as being able to do consultations with those people who are interested in reaching out to you. We'll be sure to do that. Do you have anything final you'd like to share? Anything that's kind of out there that I didn't cover?
Well, just to wrap it up, remember, we have a body problem, not a specific joint problem, and that 95% of the illnesses that we encounter in our life are lifestyle related. So whether you seek me out, seek out somebody that will address your lifestyle along with adequately addressing your pain,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll go a lot farther with your approach. Remember, the pain doctor is there to wake you up to something that's greater within you that needs to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
I thank you for inviting me on and sharing my my methodologies with you and your listeners, and I only hope the best. I will say this: if anybody contacts me through the pain guru, the knee pain guru,
This would be the Comella Foundation. This
the
is a
Comella
nonprofit.
Foundation,
Yeah.
they will automatically qualify for 5% off of any services. And any initial consultation I do, a quick conversation on the phone, 30 minutes, that's free anyway.
Okay.
So
Great.
I want them to feel like they got hope. Let's keep hope alive. There is relief out there. Take a deep breath, everybody, down into the belly. Exhale slowly and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. Well, thank you, Brian. On behalf of the Comella Foundation and the Pain Education Podcast, I really appreciate you being here. I'm going to wrap this up for today. This is Bill Paravano, the Knee Pain Guru. Thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you on the next video. Thank you for tuning into this week's segment of the Pain Education Corner. Join us next week for another conversation on natural healing methods to eliminate pain. To learn more about the work we do at the Comella Foundation, please visit our website at the Comella, COMELLA, foundation.org.